and investment planning together. Visit alphawealthgroup.com for a free report.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. When the end of the world comes, I want to be floating down Bayshore Boulevard in Tampa Bay in an inflatable duck like these guys.
Oh my God.
Parts of Tampa are inundated with that storm surge, with that floodwater. Derek?
All right, Sarah, so we're going to step away from this, the seriousness of this storm for just 1 second. You got to bear with me because this is something you don't see every day. Guys, what are you doing? Literally, this is a very new way to beat rush hour traffic on Bayshore Boulevard in Tampa. These guys are kayaking down this major thoroughfare, Tampa over my shoulder here. I mean, look at that. I don't want to minimize the serious nature of this storm, but this is what people are dealing with.
Yeah, right. I'll minimize. But they weren't on a kayak. They were on
an inflatable duck with shades.
Yeah, with shades. They had like a goofy party hats, and they were paddling. There's two of them, two white dudes that I bet are from the Midwest that moved to Tampa. I'm sure. And they're making fun of the reporter, like, okay, you're acting like we're all going to die, and we're fine.
Yeah, I have a feeling they were in their basement playing video games and maybe perhaps working over some controlled substances before they came up with this idea. But anyway,
we're going to tweet it out. It's the funniest thing I've seen in a long time.
Something also that's bizarre and water related. The police have to be lifeguards now. Did you see the story about the Friday morning swim club? There is such a thing.
Yes, it's been around for 2 years. I know the organizers of it.
I guess there's some dispute with the park district. So hundreds of people showing up Friday morning, jumping in Lake Michigan despite the dangerous swimming conditions. Is it never not dangerous? And police officers spent their morning at Montrose Beach keeping an eye on the swimmers. Why?
Well, because two men had drowned in different locations. Because you're not supposed to have floating devices.
What?
And all of them bring floaties and jump in.
Excuse me, you're missing the point. How is this the job of the Chicago police given the situation with public safety in Chicago? This is not a job for Chicago police. Do we have lifeguards? Does the park district employ lifeguards?
But Friday morning swim club, they all jump in at 7 a.m. and lifeguards get on the job at 9. So there's no lifeguards present.
So it's a police job? No, it's not. It's ridiculous. The city's just so ass backwards on everything. At the same time, I'm reading in these times because I like reading socialist rags in my off time. Johnson has steadily pushed forward with treatment not trauma. Grassroots coalition-led proposal to replace police officers with mental health clinicians for 911 calls to mental health crisis and homelessness and so on and so forth. So we're taking police off 911 calls so they can be lifeguards? Tell me how that makes sense. Well, let's get somebody to tell me. Ray Lopez, 15th Ward Alderman, joins us now. Ray, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it. Do we have Ray?
Ray.
Hello, Ray.
Alderman Lopez.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay, there he is. All right. Just like a small thing that's indicative of a big thing. Is that the highest best use of limited police resources when we're down 1,000 cops to play lifeguard?
Well, you don't expect them to actually catch criminals in Chicago, do you?
No, of course not.
I mean, this is a matter of priorities for the city, and clearly people jumping in the lake without a permit is more important than addressing the 19,000 vehicle thefts in the city of Chicago, the 700 homicides that we see in a year, or any one of the other number of unsolved shootings that go on in our communities. But let's go after the people jumping in the lake.
And it makes no sense. And then our mayor is suing Kia and Hyundai because their cars aren't safe enough. They're easily compromised.
Do you remember when Lori Lightfoot blamed the retailers for them being the victims of the smash and grabs and of the thefts in their stores and said it was their fault that they were being robbed, not the criminals' fault for coming in robbing them. It's absolutely ridiculous the lengths that we will go to in this city to blame everyone else except the criminal for what's going on. And as proof of how easy it was to steal Kias, the mayor showed a video of a car that was broken into where the steering column was removed and a USB thing had to be used and all these things had to be done. I never once brought up the fact that this was an intentional act to commit a felony by stealing someone's car, damaging it, and then coming in with this computer software to steal the car. But it's clearly the car's fault for sitting parked in someone's garage or on someone's street.
So if 100 days in, is the new guy just like the old guy with a slightly better bedside manner?
Well, he does know how to iron his clothes better than she ever did, so I'll give him that. But I think
she was hard to fit, not off the rack.
But I will say that, Lori Lightfoot, as much as we did not get along, at least I knew where she stood. I don't know where he stands, and I don't know who's making these calls for the city of Chicago. Showing up is not enough. It might work for social promotion in the classroom, but it doesn't work for government. And, being there for the photos is great, but you have to have some substance behind you. And I think the Sun-Times recently reported that we have 4 of our major departments without leaders, most notably now the Department of Public Health. We have no concern for what the mechanics of government are and how you can improve the lives with the delivery of city service because he's still on his honeymoon tour 100 days in. We've got some serious issues, along with a $16 billion budget that he's got to come up and figure out how to pay for.
One of those serious issues was discussed. He did this sit-down for Fox Chicago with a disembodied digital head named Scott Schneider, where he was asked about the migrants situation and, is it time to maybe, I guess he sort of insinuated, is it time to rethink Sanctuary City? What are we doing with migrants that are in police stations, the shelters that are being stood up, and so forth? Here's what he said. I want to get your reaction.
Well, as I've said repeatedly, Chicago maintaining its status as a welcoming city is an important part of our tradition and our history. Many people know that 40 years ago that Mayor Harold Washington declared the city of Chicago to be sanctuary. And I'm grateful for that leadership because had it not been for that movement a generation ago, we would not be positioned to be the welcoming space for families who were seeking refuge, like my family, who came up during the second migration from the South, Salis, Mississippi, and families who are coming up from Central and South America. Look, it's going to take all of us to address this humanitarian dynamic, the state, the county government, as well as the city government. Now, what I'm encouraged by is that we do have a real strong collaboration here in the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, Cook County government, pushing the federal government to provide more support for families. We're going to need it.
Alderman Lopez, will you be part of this burgeoning collaboration?
Well, I don't, you can't hear my head shaking fervorously left or right listening to that comment because I don't even know where to begin with the falsehoods that's put narratives that are being pushed out in that comment. First off, when Harold Washington did Welcoming City, it wasn't for people coming from Mississippi. It was for the undocumented individuals coming from other countries who were trying to find refuge in the city of Chicago. What I also know is that the Welcoming City now, the way that it was amended in 2021 with Lori Lightfoot and all her lefties who took out every carve-out and provision that allowed us to work in very specific cases with the federal government to address criminality among the undocumented, few as that may be, has left us in a very vulnerable state, especially as we see 15,000 people being shipped to our city who are now learning some of the worst habits our city has to offer, getting involved in gangs, drugs, prostitution, things like that. We have to address that. And the fact that he has the wherewithal to say that every level of government, city, county, state, is working together to bring resources, they haven't brought squat to the city of Chicago, which taxpayers have the burden, nearly 85%, $163 million in the first 6 months alone, probably going to top out near $300 million by the end of this year, with little support from the federal government, little support from the state, and no solutions coming to address the asylum seekers who are here who probably don't have valid claims to seek asylum and should be immediately deported.
So what are you and other aldermen doing to reestablish limits, to this welcoming city ordinance?
So we have seen in some of the shelters and locations throughout the city where a small number of individuals, are engaging in activity, drug use, sex, prostitution, male and female prostitution, and are recruitment fodder for gangs. What we would like to do is to bring back 4 common sense categories where if individuals are undocumented in our city and engaging in gang-related, drug-related, prostitution-related, or sex crimes with minors, arrested or convicted, then we will work with the federal authorities to remove them from our city. Seems kind of common sense that you don't want anyone participating in those 4 categories in your city, especially if they don't have legal status to be here. So we will be introducing an amendment to the ordinance to put those categories back in place so that if individuals are here and are arrested or convicted of anything related to those 4 categories only, then we will engage with the federal authorities to remove them from our city.
That's a smart way to do it. I mean, I think that's better than arguing about the symbolism of sanctuary city designation. Just focus on an area where there probably shouldn't be much disagreement, which is removing people who've committed crimes, and working with the federal government to do so, who could be opposed to that, and let's hear their arguments if you are. Yeah, I like that approach. I think that's smart. Is this part of, you talked to us one time, you were on the show previously, about this common sense caucus with a handful of aldermen who are not criminally insane that are left on the council. Napolitano and Sposato and you and a couple of, is that coming together, or is this de facto what you guys are doing, working together?
Kind of like this is a de facto creation of ours, and we're still working. Alderman Sposato's trying to bring together a more formalized version of that caucus. But I think common sense gravitates towards each other's vision, and this is a result of that.
Something else I wanted to get your take on too. We talked about it a bit yesterday, and you just hear so many of these stories, and we mentioned one, and we got a handful more. The Marinos family, immigrants, they own Belmar Wire Products in Bucktown. In December of 2022, they were ambushed by a 400% year-over-year property tax hike, which forced them to lay off half of their staff, half of their workforce. Then, other stories rolled in. And these are anecdotes, but they're anecdotes that point to something that is a systemic issue. Property tax on a commercial building we own in Lincoln Park went from $30K to $60K in a year. We're selling. Warehouse on the west side, 100,000 square feet, went from $63,000 in 2020 to $185,000 in 2021. Who can justify this increase was the question. What do you say about the cost of doing business in Chicago, particularly as it relates to essentially the liquidation of equity, particularly commercial properties?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily the liquidation of equity, Dan. I think it's the theft of equity from individuals who invest in communities, invest property, and are now seeing their equity in their properties stolen from them by outrageous taxes and assessments. Assessments and taxation are real. They're not academic exercises. And when you have individuals who've never owned anything, never built anything, never ran anything, never truly pursued the American dream to be their own entrepreneurs, their own owners, their own bosses, and these politicians act as if there's no connection between the two. They don't realize that you can't just mark up someone's assessment 600% and not expect to see them fold or downsize or be impacted by this. You can't raise people's taxes ad nauseum and expect everyone just to keep paying and paying and paying as if money just magically prints itself in the basement of City Hall. That's not how this works. And when you forget that fact, you push people out who've been longtime owners of businesses, longtime property owners, housing providers in our communities, and then have neighborhoods that have been completely decimated and don't know why. Then you start claiming it's equity and disinvestment when it was actually the converse of that, the overtaxation that destroyed a community. We have to get back to basics and understanding the connection between government, taxes, and real life. And the sooner that we're able to start having those conversations with aldermen, state reps, and everyone else, the better. Because if you allow the current crop of politicians who've only come out of academia and never really done anything with their lives other than benefit from the public trough, they're never going to see the harm in what they're doing.
Ray Lopez, 15th Ward Alderman. Alderman Lopez, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.